So it's really important that you work on yourself more than anybody else. And just ignore the negative out there. Just keep your distance if you can, and just focus on what you are doing, and never ever ask them, if you know they're negative, what do you think about my progress so far? Because they'll look at you as if you've got two heads and say, you're still doing it, are you?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, so it's really important that you focus on your goals and focus on yourself. And even if it means, you just keep it to yourself, what you're doing. And like you say, there are some people in life who are often not your family and friends, who will actually support you in your goals. So, yeah, so don't waste your time on other people. If they're not supporting you on day one, it's going to be a day 1,000 before they at least say, oh, you finished it.
Yeah.
So I've learned that as well.
Hello, and welcome back to Journey of a Fearless Female. I am your host, Paola Rosser, and this week my guest is J.M. Phillips. She's an author and retired occupational therapist. Motivated by retelling of family stories, she wrote Lamlash Stree, which is about navigating family life in London after World War II. She is a storyteller with a passion to inspire families to connect through telling of their past. Growing up in the UK, J.M. emigrated to Canada after working in London for a few years. She spent 30 years working as an occupational therapist and a hospital manager before retiring. Everybody, please welcome J.M. Phillips. Hi, thank you for being part of the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, and it's lovely to be here.
I'm excited for you to tell your journey as a fearless female. So let's start from the beginning. Where did this all begin?
Well, it all began not with me thinking I was going to write a book, to be honest. It probably began when I was in my 50s. Now, I'm not sure what age your listeners are and your viewers, your followers, but for me, it started in my 50s. So I I got my degree, I immigrated to Canada, met somebody, a Canadian there. And I spent the next maybe 20 plus years doing, going to work, coming back, looking after the children, being, that the family thing. And I began to realize that I'd really sort of given up on my life. I wasn't doing anything for myself.
Mm,
I was doing all the things I felt I should do in that role as a wife and a mother, and I really wasn't looking at, in terms of my career, further in my career, or any of those things. And for some reason, it changed when I hit my 50s. I started to think, well, maybe I could maybe do some more study. Maybe I could even get my master's degree, because obviously I have my degree in occupational therapy.
hmm
And so then I was in my 50s, and I asked a few people, and some people would say, oh, yes, that's great. Why don't you go ahead? But a lot of people said, well, at your time of life, what are you doing? Or, you're fine where you are. It's not going to be any benefit to this. But anyway, I went ahead and I did it. And I did a couple of single courses, which you had to do before they would consider you for the degree in case you didn't have the academic ability.
hmm
So I did these online every night. I would be 2 hours on the computer Monday to Thursday, and doing all my other stuff as well, with the family life and so on. And at the end of that 3 months, I got an A in the course. And I thought, wow, I didn't expect that. After like 20 odd years of not studying, I thought, well, this is it, man. My time is over. Your brain cells
Yeah.
are going to be gone. Anyway, I did really well. And I actually got a small grant from that, a small amount of money, a little scholarship. I think it's about $200.
Uh-huh.
But nonetheless, it was still another recognition that not only was I doing well with my grades, but also it was good enough and there were about 15 of us, all at graduate degree level. So it wasn't people of mixed abilities. It was, the few sort of thing that had focused on academics. And I was doing really well. And that gave me a little bit of confidence. And I
Yeah.
guess this is what I've learned as well. Confidence is cumulative. So it gradually builds, one thing builds on another. So from there, I went to, and thought, well, maybe I'll do my second course. So I did that. And again, I did really well. And then I applied and I was accepted into the master's program, the full program. And then about 5 years later, because I was doing it part time, working and so on, 5 years later, I convocated. I went to the graduation ceremony. And people again said to me, well, you're not going to go, over to Halifax, Nova Scotia, in Canada, and go and pick up your degree in person. Not at your time of life and all this garbage, right?
Oh
And I
my
said, yes,
gosh.
and I've worked for this. This has been a lot of work. I'm going to cross that stage. I'm going to cross that stage, have my hand shaking, have the diploma put into my hand, and I'm going to get the hat, the gown and the hat. And I'm going to have my photograph taken. I'm going to put it on
Yeah,
the
you
wall.
put in all the work.
But you would be amazed at the number of people that have you in a little pigeonhole. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? What's wrong with you? Is the
Yeah.
message you're getting? So that's where it all started. So with all these things going on in my life, obviously my personal life in terms of my marriage wasn't exactly the right thing for me.
Hmm.
And so eventually I got the courage up, which was a very difficult thing to do after all those years, and going with the family saying, what's wrong with you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I divorced him. Then I was in my late 50s. I thought I had
How long were
money.
you married to him?
It was like 28 years.
28 years?
Um,
Wow.
I know. If people say to me, "What happened to you?" I don't know, but it was a good decision. But it did take me a long time to come to that conclusion, right?
Yeah.
So I did that, but I was really pleased about it because what I learned from going out and doing just my degree and a few other things as well, similar at the time, is that I really didn't have a good view of my abilities. I'd lost my sense of myself.
Mm.
um, when you're with somebody who's very negative, and it could be a friend or whoever, you actually give up on yourself without knowing it when you're in a very negative relationship, because everything you do is twisted as like, oh, well, I knew you were going to fail it, or why are you bothering with that? Oh, you look much better when you didn't, I don't know, dye your hair blonde, or when you didn't go and get your nails done. I thought you were much more sensible. Then you get tons and tons and tons of negatives thrown at you,
Yeah. And was
and
this
that
coming from your ex-husband?
yes, yeah, basically, yes. I mean, now I can look back on it and say he was a very unhappy, and he's still a very unhappy man.
Hmm.
When I saw him like 2, 3 weeks ago, over coffee and stuff, because we had some other stuff to discuss. But yeah, bottom line is a very unhappy person in the marriage, very unhappy now, and I've had such a life since. So
Yeah.
well,
Before you go on, I wanted to just unpack a little bit about your story. Um, you started this in your 50s, and the way people were approaching you, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, everything is fine. Just stay quit, the quid pro quo, just like stay, don't move, like you're getting out of your comfort zone. And it even makes other people uncomfortable when somebody decides, I'm not going to stay in line. I'm going to get out of the sheep's herd and make my own way. And it really makes the other people uncomfortable. But 50 is not old. Like if we get to live to 90 or even 100, you still have 30, 40, 50 more years of your life. So I think that, if you're listening, you're never too old to do what you want to do. People have started businesses and become entrepreneurs at the age of 60, 70 years old. But I think we have this old notion that at a certain age, we should just be fine and we should just stay there. I've been listening to Ed Milet's book, Maxed Out, and he says that, everybody seems to stop growing and evolving at the age of 25. It's like they just, well, this is where I'm at. I've made it to where I was supposed to make it to. Let's just be happy and not, move anything. Let's just be in the box. And it's like, but there's so much more to explore. There's so much more life to live. And I love that you decided, even after so many years, that he wasn't the right person for you, and you took a stand for yourself, because that says a lot. And for the women who are listening, if you've been married for a very long time, just because you've been married for years and years and years doesn't necessarily mean you have to stay. And if you recognize that you are unhappy and that you are stagnant, and like she said, she started to recognize how negative he was and how he would put her down, and that really does take a toll on your confidence.
it does, yes, and it's been amazing. Actually, the like 10 or 15 years since that all occurred, I've done so much. I had no idea where life was leading me. So after I, went through this, the year that we were said, okay, that's it, we're done. I got diagnosed with cancer of the cervix.
Oh my
And that
gosh.
was a toughie. So, you're going through all this other stuff, and then this happens. And they say, oh, we need the surgery within the next like few weeks. It's like, oh, here we go, right? And anyway, what I discovered was that I had friends, new friends, like I was going to Toastmasters, which is like a public speaking thing, because I wanted to sort of push myself a little bit. And I met a really good friend there, and she supported me through the whole thing. And in a sense, I then had more support going through a crisis than I'd ever had in the marriage.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a relationship, people tend to not want to interfere, which means
Mhm.
that if they're not doing their part, they won't say anything because, well, it's your marriage sort of thing. But so what I learned from that was that you can be married for 25 years, but a friend you just met like 2 months ago is going to be far more supportive than anybody you've ever, than the person you've been with all that time.
Yeah.
So I got through that, which is great. So, and that's well in my past now. But the other thing that happened is I put a ton of weight on. I was like 40 pounds overweight. And I fell one day. That it was ice down and there was snow on top of the ice, and I fell, broke my arm in two places,
Mm.
and then I damaged the muscle, and then I could barely walk in my ankle. I was a real mess.
Oh,
So during the 5 weeks where I was in pain from the broken arm, because they just put it in a sling, right? And
yeah.
so I had a lot of time to think. So once I was given the green light, I started swimming, and then I decided I was going to get a personal trainer. Um,
Oh,
if I'd been in the marriage, he would have said, "Oh no, way too much money." But I thought, no, this is my money. I'm going to do this, and it was one of the best things I ever did. It took me almost 2 years, but I lost all of the 40 pounds.
oh,
And about 18 months into it, and I was going twice a week for weight training, and also obviously watching what healthy eating and this sort of
yeah.
thing. So then about 18 months in, I was in between coming back and forwards between the UK and Canada. And there was a lot of, I'm in an area right now, because I'm in the UK right at this moment, where they do a lot of park run, a lot of running, 5K
Yeah.
basically running. And so I went back to my trainer in Canada and I said, "You're going to think I've lost my mind, but do you think I can start running 5Ks?" Because at this point I was like mid-60s, right?
Yeah.
And so she looked at me, she said, "Oh no, that's fine," she said, because I thought she was going to say, "Oh, what do you think if you lost your mind completely?" And she said, "No,
Yeah.
that's fine." She said, "Just go to your doctor, get the green light from your doctor." So I went through that process. And the doctors sort of patted me on the head, gave me a stress test, patted me on the head, sort of thing, and said, "No, you go for it now. Off you go." So I thought, really, I'm supposed to do this at 65? I'm supposed to start running? I'm like,
Oh
because I
my gosh,
wasn't a
that's
runner.
amazing.
I know it's good. Life's been like that, right? And so,
Yeah.
so then I did, I think first time I ran on like a indoor running track, I ran for about 6 steps, and I thought, okay, that's enough now, don't overdo this.
Yes.
Anyway, so about 3 months later, it was in the winter time, and I was back in the UK. So I went park run down at the park that's just down the road from me here now. And I was doing 5Ks every week. And then actually it ran into COVID, unfortunately. After about 3 months,
Oh,
then COVID hit. It was the COVID years, right? But nonetheless, I was still running, doing something I didn't think I could do. So again, it was, first of all, it was the master's degree, and I did my thesis to qualify for my master's, to finish that off. Then I lost all that weight, which is supposed to be really impossible once you hit a certain age, whatever that may be.
yeah.
And then I was running 5K. So I was sort of building up all these things bit by bit by bit that I really didn't think that I would ever be doing in life. And also,
Yeah.
while this was going on, I had started writing the book, Lamlash Street. What had happened was that my dad had got Alzheimer's, and he died from it eventually, which was a horrible way to go.
Mm.
So
Oh,
he lost all his memories. My mum still was really quite good. But also, my mum was the last of 12 children, 12 siblings. So she had no one to talk to about the good old days, or, oh, yes, remember in Lamlash Street, we used to go down to Bob White's to get the seafood food on for Sunday lunches. And, oh, yes, George, remember you used to learn how to swim at school, and all these little like family stories, basically. And she had no one to talk to about these. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could like start writing some of these down? Because hey, I've written a thesis. So that was a long document. I'm sure I could
yes.
write some things down here. Not as writing a book. This was just writing the stories down.
Yeah.
And so I said to Mum, tell me more about, the good old days and what happened with Auntie so and what happened when I went to Great Ormond Street Hospital. Do you remember that? Oh, yes, we remember that. So I had these great, fantastic conversations with my mum about the good old days
Yeah.
back in Lamlash Street, which was in the 1960s, mid 1960s. And so I sort of put these stories down, and and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice if I just had these book of stories, and then one person, it wouldn't even be a published book, just a manuscript, and somebody in the family would like to read it, or if they didn't think it was worthwhile reading, they'd put it in the closet somewhere, and maybe the next generation might say, "Oh, this is what Jill wrote. Isn't this interesting what she wrote about? And did you know?"
Yeah.
So I always, I wasn't thinking of being a published author. And then one day I got this email through saying, we're looking for people who are writing books and we want to help, coach them and go through the whole process of publishing and so on. And I thought, well, I've just been through divorce. I've got this, I've got my graduate degree now. And I've started running 5Ks. Why can't I do this as well? Which is not me. It wasn't the 28-year me who was in the marriage. I was nothing like that, right?
Yeah.
And so then I got in touch with them, and then they basically, handheld me through writing the book. They said, "Well, do you want to turn this into a book?" And I thought, I suppose so. But do you really think anyone's really going to be wanting to know about what my mum did, or how it took the whole of Monday just to do the laundry? I mean, will people really want to know about this? And reality is, yes, they do, because they can relate to it. Or their grandchildren can talk to the grandparents about this sort of thing. So people are really interested in learning about the old days from a personal viewpoint.
Yeah.
So that's why I went ahead and I published the book. But I had no plans to be a published author or to do any of these things. I mean, if you had said to me 35 years ago, you're going to end your marriage and you're going to start running and you're going to publish a book, and I said, you have lost your mind. That's not me. I mean, I was a very quiet, shy person. Um,
Yeah.
and which is probably why you stay in situations which are not terribly healthy. So yeah, that's a lot of my story right now. And right now, as I've just hinted at as well, the year that COVID hit, I was over here in just seeing my mother because she was nearly 90. She was very, very frail. And the poor lady passed away from COVID actually in the
Oh,
second year of COVID. Um, and because of that, I'm now right now sitting in her house in the UK when my daughter's over in Canada. Again, I didn't think I'd be doing this. When I emigrated to Canada, I thought that's it, I'm gone. I'm gone for
yeah.
the whole life, basically. So life is not what you think it's going to be.
Oh,
Um, but it is very cumulative, and that's something that's really surprised me. That people have said to me, so how did you manage to do all these things? Well, they just sort of happened in one sense, but I think I was open to them happening as well. I
yeah.
think I'd got to, I mean, I'm sitting here with you doing a podcast now. If you had said to me 35 years ago, even if they had existed, well, yes, people are going to interview you, they're going to want to know about your life. It's like, why? you know,
Yeah.
but yeah, you
I think
need,
like when you think about your story, that you had an anchor around your neck, which was your husband, who basically kept you at bay, and you always had, I feel like, the spirit inside of you to do more, be more. But when you have someone, like you said earlier, who's constantly telling you, why are you doing that? That's too much money, or who, yeah, that you're never going to pass. Like I grew up with a very negative mom. And, when someone is constantly in your ear and telling you, you're not good enough, you're not this, you're not that, or who do you think you are? Why are you going to do that? You do tend to play smaller and smaller. It's almost like they're smothering your soul. And then once you finally were like, okay, I'm going to take one step, I'm going to take another step, and you started to realize that you can actually do more than what this person is telling you. And it doesn't have to be necessarily like your ex-husband or your teachers, but like, yeah, when someone tells you something and it sticks in the back of your mind, you will repeat that to yourself over and over. And then you get afraid to leave the comfort of your home, to step outside of your comfort zone and do the things because you have all these excuses. I'm too old. I'm too shy. I'm not confident enough. Who's going to interview me? Who's going to want to listen to these stories? But you would be surprised like how many people would love to hear these stories of Lamlash, or how many people would love to run a 5K with you, or how many people, like you said, when you're at Toastmasters, this one person who you just met supported you more than your husband did after 28 years. It's like you would be surprised how many people are out there rooting for you and wanting you to succeed and wanting you to share your beautiful light that is part of your soul's purpose, And if you're listening to this and you're listening to her story, you're never too old to start something. You're never too old to go back to school. You're never too old to start a business. You're never too old to get your master's degree. You're never too old to run a 5K. She was 65 when she ran a 5K. Like I used to run 5Ks when I was 26, 27 years old. And I remember because I wasn't that good of a runner. I'm actually 5'3", so I have really short legs. And I remember like, oh man, if this lady who looks like she's in her 60s and 70s can do it, I can do it. And it would motivate me to keep going because I would do 5Ks and half marathons. And I'm like, as long as I could keep up with this lady, I'm good. Or as long as I could keep up with this man, I'm good. It's like, I think that we give up on ourselves a lot, and we doubt our capabilities and our talents and our skills, and we get really sad and we get depressed. But like you said, as long as you're open to the idea of something changing, watch how the universe will bring these things into fruition.
That's right. And the other thing I just want to add as well is it for me anyway, it wasn't as if I suddenly flipped sort of overnight. So at one point, it was like I was a person who wasn't really doing very much with my life. And suddenly now I can do all these things. There are still some days when, I have my own excuses. I mean, it's not as if all those negative messages in the back of your head, you suddenly stop listening to them. There are some days when they do creep back.
Mhm.
We all have our excuses, like, I don't have the time, or oh, I'm really depressed today, or I've been upset by somebody, or I don't have the willpower today, or somebody else needs my attention first, and I really can't go for my run. Like these things are still in your head. But it's the willingness to say, okay, so I had a bad day or a bad morning. Okay, well, let's just get reset now and then let's move on and let's go on and do what I know I can do. So I don't want people to think that, oh, well, I'm not perfect because there's this person, Jill, out here, and she's done all these amazing things. And suddenly she's forgotten all these negative messages. No, 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 that's not reality. They're still in my head. They still try to make a comeback. And if you say you're in a situation where you've been upset by somebody, you've broken up with somebody or something like that, yes, you still have your bad days, as I did before. But now the difference is that I know it's not. If I say to myself, oh, this is terrible, it's over, there's also another voice in my head saying, what are you thinking? This is absolute garbage.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing that I've learned is I have to talk back to these negative messages in my head that are saying, well, it's not going to work out. It's just going to be terrible. And I think, no, we don't know yet. It hasn't happened. Don't
Mhm.
sit there getting mired in your own thoughts of, oh, that my life is over. It's like, no, it's not over. It's whatever you want to do. You don't know the future because it hasn't happened yet. So I
Yeah.
want people to understand that it is still there. It gets easier to deal with, but it does still need to be dealt with. It's not as if it's something that suddenly magically disappears from your life. No, it doesn't. And the other thing is that if you have negative family and friends that you're still in contact with, they are still going to be giving you the old message of, well, what's wrong with you? You're still doing that strange thing, are you? You still like, you're not doing another book, are you? I mean, wasn't one good enough? So you're
Yeah.
still going to hear these messages, not only in your head, but also from other people you have in your lives. And some people, like family, will always be there. And some friends, for whatever reason, will always be there as well. So you can't cut these people out. You have to find a way of dealing with it. So the messages do still get through to you. And that's the point in which you withdraw and you say just no, I can do this. I know I've done this and I've done this and I've done this, and that all worked out just fine. This probably will work out just fine as well. So you have to coach yourself. You have to talk to yourself and say,
Yeah.
it's never going to be perfect, because it isn't. There's nobody waved this wand and suddenly I'm a different person. I've still got all the other stuff in my head. So
Yeah.
I think that's important. So don't give up when you meet the first roadblock or the first stumble. Just go back and say, you know what? I did that. Sure, it was tough. I mean, there were times, I don't know if anyone's ever written a thesis. It's like it's a never-ending task you've got, right? It goes on and on and on. I
Yeah.
think
It's
probably
one of the
two
reasons
people
why I
read
never went back to get my master's degree, because I was like,
it.
I'm
Like,
not
don't
writing a
blame me.
thesis.
But yeah, but the reality
Yeah.
is, I mean, I think only two people ever bothered. I mean, I've never been paid for it. So it's not until 10 people actually ask for a copy of your thesis, you actually get anything. So not
Yeah.
even 10 people have. However, my book, a couple of thousand people have actually read my book the last time I looked,
That's
which is
good.
lovely and
Yeah.
surprising.
I
So
always tell my clients and my friends, if you are waiting around for your friends and your family to support your decisions, you're going to be waiting around forever. And I used to feel that way when I started my podcast, when I started my coaching business. Like, it's different from what my family does. All I'm one of four sisters and one brother, and three of my sister, or one of five sisters, three of my sisters are teachers. And so I'm doing something completely different than what they're doing. And so it's like, wait, why aren't you a teacher? You should just be a teacher like us. Like, like, stay in the line. It's like, stay in the sheep's herd. And you're the one person that wants to get away from the sheep's herd. And so it makes them afraid. So they're not just not supporting you because they don't love you. They're trying to protect you. And the only way they know how to protect you is for you to stay in the sheep's herd, and the herd with everybody else. Because they've never seen someone write a book, or they've never seen someone do a 5K, or they've never seen someone go back for their master's at the age of 50. It's because they're just afraid. And so when they're not supporting you, find the people that will. I love that she found that friend in Toastmasters. Find the people that will support you to do the things that you are inspired. Like, there's a reason why these thoughts came into her head. Why not do a 5K? It's because her soul was yearning for it. Like, we all have this beautiful soul's purpose, and we all have this like mission to do stuff here on earth. And you might as well get it done. Like, go get it done and find your support network and your system that's going to be there, because your friends and family, they're more likely not going to support you. I have more
that's true.
strangers on the internet support me than my family and friends.
Oh, that's true. And linking right into this, the other thing is to be aware of is the only person you can change is yourself.
Mhm.
So you could spend huge amounts of time, years and years and years lost trying to change that person who's been so negative towards you. And I can speak to this because I was in the marriage, which and that was really what it came down to. And they don't change. They may
Mhm.
make a little change for about 5 minutes and then essentially go back to who they were. So use all the energy that you're trying to change, you're using, trying to get the other person to change. Use it on yourself, because as you change and you become more assertive and more confident, and as you say, start running your 5Ks or you publish a book, they then change anyway, and you're just focusing on yourself. So I met up with my ex-setter a few weeks ago, and so I gave him a copy of my book, and he said, oh, I'm really impressed by that. I think that's the only time I've ever heard him say those words in one sentence
Wow.
addressed to me. And so it's work on yourself, work on your own interests, as you've done as well. And eventually, when you finish your graduate degree, or when you run your 5Ks, or when you get your book published and you hand them a physical copy of the book, they'll start thinking, oh, really? Oh, she actually finished it. And then they change in the way, well, you know what people are like.
Yeah.
I may not say it to your face, but that's really what they're thinking. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's here, is it? And then they will then treat you differently because of you working on yourself. So it's really important that you work on yourself more than anybody else. And just ignore that the negative out there. Just keep your distance if you can, and just focus on what you are doing, and never ever ask them, if you know they're negative, what do you think about my progress so far? Because they'll look at you as if you've got two heads and say, You're still doing it, are you?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, so it's really important that you focus on your goals and focus on yourself. And even if it means, you just keep it to yourself what you're doing. And like you say, there are some people in life who are often not your family and friends who will actually support you in your goals. So, yeah, so don't waste your time on other people. If they're not supporting you on day one, it's going to be a day 1,000 before they at least say, oh, you finished it.
Yeah.
So I've learned that as well.
So let's go back to your book. I love that you said you decided to start collecting the stories that your mom was saying because I resonate with that. My mother-in-law has dementia. And when I first started my podcast 4 years ago, I remember I had taken my podcast equipment to her house because I was going to interview my sister-in-law. And my mother-in-law was, well, why don't you want to record me? And honestly, like at that moment, I was like, well, what are you going to talk about? I just didn't like think to record her stories. And now that she has dementia, I feel awful that I didn't take the time to really record her memories and record like what she experienced. And I think about that all the time. Like my father passed away when I was 26 and I didn't like get to record his stories or like his past. And we are like coming towards this generation where a lot of it wasn't documented. Like it's crazy. My stepson is 20, going to be 21 in February, and he has videos of him from the day of his birth, all of his life. Like it's like his whole he made a movie when he was 18 and he made an entire documentary of his life from the birth, the day that he was in the hospital to like 18. And it's like we're losing that generation that didn't have, the modality of being able to record. We only have the being able to tell stories. And so I think it's such a beautiful thing that you did with your mom to be able to record these stories and to be able to publish a book. And like you said, well, what if the next generation in my family line wants to read these stories? And, I think it's such a spectacular idea. And if you're listening and you have like a parent or a grandparent that, I definitely do what Jill did and like go and spend time with them and write down their stories.
Yeah, don't get intimidated. Don't think to yourself, "Oh, I can't write a book." No, you probably can, but it's not why you're doing it. You're doing it to remember those times, to recall those stories. And if you say some of your family members have passed on or can't recall them, there's sometimes aunts and uncles and cousins who also knew that time fairly well.
Hmm.
After I published my book, my cousin Jim is only 18 months older than me, can remember a little bit more than it is actually even in the book about Lamlash Stree. So if even though your mum or dad or whoever your grandparents have gone, ask around the family because often there are people in the family or even close friends that know as equally as much, or at least a good part. And if anyone has any photographs from the day, those are really helpful as well.
Hmm.
Um, Actually, I think one of the reasons this started is there's a photograph I have of, I think I was just born that year, and it's everybody. There's this pathetic looking tree in the corner, which I think has blooms on it because nobody could afford the ornaments. But there must have been about 35 or 40 members of my family. They were all my aunts and uncles and my cousins to date. My grandparents were there. I mean, my grandmother died when I think I was about 2, and my grandfather when I was 3. So I really didn't know them terribly well. And my mum actually she has been through and she's actually told me the names of all the people in there. But I have this, it's sort of a wedding size photograph, like it's A4 here in the UK. It's um, letter size, I think it is there.
Hmm.
Yeah, so but yeah, if you have any photographs, they're really good starting places for these as well, because people often have boxes of things in corners, in attics, and things like that. So one of the things I did, with dad passing on, and then mum and I was over here a fair bit, was I have a lot of photographs from here, and I've got them in plastic boxes and so on. So I can look back on them, and actually, I have a website, and some of my family photos are on the website. And the lovely thing actually about the book, which I'm so happy about, is the fact that there are 2 family photographs on the front page. There's one of my aunts leaning against the steps, which shows you 11B Lamlash Street, which is the
Hmm.
house we lived in. And there's the other picture on the front. It happens to be me. It's me. I was at one of those school photograph things with the map of the world behind me and a pretend pencil as they were taking my photograph, sort of thing. And that's on the front cover as well. So, these are really nice things that you really don't anticipate. And the other thing it is about writing a book is once you're published, people who are complete strangers ask you questions about things, and you never in your wildest dreams think that anyone would really care about any of these things. So great things happen once your stories are out there.
Mm.
The feedback I've been getting, actually, one of the really interesting things is there was a girl who she was only 15 years old at the time, used to live in the basement. We had like a 4-story Victorian house. She lived in the basement of the house. They were offered a house elsewhere, but they couldn't take their pet dog with them because it was in a tenement or something. Anyway, we ended up adopting the dog, and for the next, so Rex, our dog, for the next 15 years, we had Rex with us. I wrote the book. She came across the book on my website because it's an unusual name, Lamlash. And we've actually been in touch, spoken to her on the phone. And we're actually going to meet up after about 60 odd years. We'll be meeting up
Wow.
over Christmas sometimes. So things happen you don't anticipate.
Yeah.
So it's get your family stories out there. The other nice thing happens is that when you're talking to the family members about what happened in those days, they reminisce and they are so, so happy to tell you the stories and the fact that you value them. And one of my lasting memories of Mum is back in, I think it was August before she died. And I had the manuscript. I was going through just editing. I printed the whole thing out, tired of looking at the screen, printed the whole thing out, was making some changes and that before it went off to be published, to be printed. And she said, "Oh, is that your book?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Can I have a look at it?" So she read the whole book from cover
Wow.
to cover. And she was grinning from ear to ear the whole time. I
Oh,
think she'd gone right back to she remembered the old days. So she couldn't talk to her brothers and sisters because they'd all passed on, but she could at least sit there and read and think about the old days. And she said, "Oh, this is going to be a book." I said, "Yeah, Mum, complete strangers are going to hopefully want copies of this book. And it's going to be published. It's going to be, on the internet," because she wasn't very technically minded, obviously.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, she was so, so happy. And she was smiling from ear to ear as she was reading the book. And I thought, you know what? This was worth it just to see that she, for the time she was reading it, she was back in those days and she
Yeah.
was so, so happy to remember those times. So yeah, so do it because it's important to the family,
Yeah.
really is what it
It's a
is.
beautiful way to leave your imprint on the universe after you've gone. So, as we wrap up this episode, Jill, what would be your nugget of wisdom for anyone who is listening?
Okay, there's this phrase, and it's actually on my mantelpiece, on my fireplace, and it says, "Do it because they say you couldn't." So do
Ooh.
something because they say you can't do it. I don't know
Ah,
where
I
it
love
comes
that.
from. I checked out to see if it was somebody's quote, but apparently not. It's just a phrase that's out there. But yeah, so and every time obviously I'm in the main living room now, and I'm looking up and think, yeah, do it because they say you can't. Basically, they say you couldn't, and it's like, yeah. Been doing a lot of that in the past few years, and it's working out really well.
Yes,
That's my
exactly.
favorite phrase. Yeah.
How can my audience find you and how
Oh,
could they
right.
find your
Yes.
book?
Right. So I'm on amazon.com.ca and .co.uk. Lamlash is the name of the book. So it's Lamlash. Very
Perfect.
unusual name. But if you just put Lamlash and Amazon, it pops up. And I have a website as well, some family photographs on there. It's JM Phillips, PHILLIPS, author.com. And
All
that's where you
right.
can find a little bit more as well.
And all of her links will be in the show notes. Well, thank you again for being on the podcast.
That's more than welcome. It's lovely to share my thoughts. Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for listening to Journey of a Fearless Female. I'm your host, Paola Rosser. If you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual mentor, you can book a free discovery call with me at www.fearlessfemale.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at fearlessfemale_coach, subscribe to my YouTube channel at fearlessfemale, or find me on TikTok. I'm under at paola.rosser. And if you love this episode, make sure you hit subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a review. I read every single review, and I truly appreciate the time you spend writing it.